Well, good morning to episode 173 of Ascension with A Course in Miracles. And today we're going to do things a little bit differently. It is November the 20th, 2024. And we're just a couple of not even like 2 weeks, I guess, since we had the elections in the US. And we're in a time of massive change. And the last couple of weeks that I've done these transmissions, it has been about the message that wanted to come through is really to understand that the elections are strictly part of the game of being on this physical plane. They are part of the egoic game that we play when we believe that we're separate from source, but all of it is happening in the mind of God. So, no souls are ever affected, hurt, damaged in any way, shape, or form, affected by anything that happens on the physical plane. However, we have an experience that we're separate. And A Course in Miracles is a manual, a teaching, a tool to train our mind to navigate the human journey with awareness. That's all that it is. And those who are willing to do the work, and it is very simple. The work is very simple. Hey guys, Dondra, thanks for traveling with us. Good to see you here again, Mike. But the tools are very simple because salvation in and of itself is very simple. There is a thought system that is of the ego, which is learned from the outside world. There's a thought system that is of God, which comes from within. One is going to be eternal because God's way of perceiving things is eternal, is consistent, whether it's today, a million years ago, or a million years from now. It's not going to change because God is eternal, always in the now. The human experience, our experience of what is, of what's happening, all of that appears strictly in linear time because the ego compartmentalizes things. So we have this lifetime, that lifetime. Today we have last week, we have next week. That's just the way the ego operates, and it makes sense that it operates that way because if we in our human experience had access to knowing that everything exists now and we had access to all knowing, what would be the fucking point of being a human? There would be no point. The point of being a human is to be a specific aspect of creation. So every single one of us, whether it's a human or it's an alien or it's a blade of grass or a grain of sand, is creation experiencing itself through that lens, through that perspective, so that it can know all that it can be. Because God, creator, love, source, spirit, universe, whatever label we want to put on that which cannot be defined, because it's so massive, we cannot fit it into a definition. It's just not possible. The human mind has been trained into, if there's not a definition, then it's not real. But what's funny about that is that what is real has no definition. And it's so everything about the ego is backwards. Course in Miracles tells us that it is absolutely, completely the opposite of what is true, which is what makes it a lie. So as we are navigating this experience of time, call it, the 2024 year, moving into 2025, but everything is interconnected. Everything is related. This is why we have been told by so many ascended masters, as within, so without, as above, so below, because everything is a reflection, because we live in a holographic universe. The one drop of water contains everything that makes up water, whether it's in a pond or in a lake or in the ocean. So when we think about ourselves as being one drop of water, we come from the same one ocean that the raindrops come from, that everything comes from. So we are in a process of awakening. And really what awakening means is remembering who we are and removing the layers of misinformation that block us from that truth. A simple example: I grew up I chose to incarnate to a family, happened to be Catholic. Well, my grandparents were Catholic. My father was Catholic. My mother was atheist. She went through growing up in a Catholic environment, going to school with Catholic nuns, having a miserable time with all the restrictions of being Catholic. And at the time, my family happened to be, my mother's side was in the Dominican Republic, Latin, very strict, very controlling. Men were in charge, women were not. So here she is, growing up in the Latin environment with the Catholic upbringing. My dad happens to be American, son of Irish grandmother and my Italian grandfather. That I'm a mutt because I'm really a blend of so many different nationalities, cultures. So really, truly, that's what I am, is a mutt. Anyhow, my dad was first generation American, but they practiced Catholicism growing up in the US. My mother grew up in Catholicism, boarding schools with nuns her whole life. I went to school with nuns up until 8th grade. So I understand much of what she used to relay. But the upbringing was always that God is a male, it's on a cloud somewhere, and like Santa Claus, it's just watching to see if you're naughty or nice. And that didn't sit well with my mother. So she basically left that religion and became an atheist. So for the most part, I grew up under Catholic teachings, Catholic doctrine, because I went to school with nuns. So that's just the way that it was. And I too, it didn't sit right with me to have this fearful God. But when my mother passed away, I was able to face the fear that I had of death, because I was petrified that I was going to die and go to hell. And her passing, which happened about, I want to say almost 2 years after my father's, I think something was already brewing inside of me with my dad's passing, because it was already activating. Well, what if there is a hell? I'm going to go there. I know my dad's going to go there for the things he did. Then my mom dies, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I really knew her. She was my best friend. She's really going to go to hell. I didn't do some of the bad things that she did, but I've done other bad things. So that activated in me a fear that sent me down the rabbit hole to unravel this. Where did the story of hell come from? And what's so beautiful is I found authors who had written books about where did all of these things come from, and they helped me look at how chronologically those stories had been fabricated. I grew up with this fear of God that was made up. I mean, these stories weren't there until they were there. But the mind has to become curious. We have to be willing to question, what is it that we know? The ego is trained into what you know, then you are right about that. And to be wrong is almost like you're worthless. You messed up. You're going to get sent to the principal's office. And that's reinforced through the schooling years, is where, what is right is what the teacher tells you, and what is wrong is your opinion. So we have been encouraged to not really have opinions, to just recite facts that were given to us. And then we say, well, this came from the Bible, or this came from that author, or this came from this test, or whatever it is, and don't question beyond that. Well, I wasn't that kind of a kid that could not question. I was in the principal's office all the time because I was always asking why. And it annoyed the teachers. And the teacher would say, again, it was nuns, it's in the Bible, and that is so. And I would say, well, who made up the Bible? Who wrote the Bible? Well, God wrote the Bible. I'm like, God doesn't write. God is on a cloud somewhere. It doesn't have fingers. It can't write. So I was one of those kids, and I'm so grateful now that I was so curious, and I was okay, because my mother, being an atheist, gave me permission to question everything. I would come home and I would tell my parents, especially my grandmother, because we lived with her as well. And I would say, oh, today I found out, what was her name? Mother, or the Virgin Mary, she was a virgin. And my dad would say, yes, she was a virgin, it was an immaculate conception, and that's how Jesus was born. And then my mom would say, no, 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 don't believe that. She was not a virgin. She had sex with Joseph. Joseph loved her, and they made up the story that it was an immaculate conception so they wouldn't stone her, because in those days it would stone women who got pregnant. And my little 10-year-old mind, 8-year-old mind, whatever I was at the time, was like, oh my God, hearing more things than I probably could handle. But what it gave me permission to do was to question. So if the church says this, and the school says this, and the nun says this, and my dad and my grandparents say this, and my mom says that, I trusted my mom. I loved my mom. I respected my mom. Her total, complete 180 opposite story about what the church and school was teaching me became permission for me to see, well, there's got to be another way. There's got to be another perspective. So as I went on my own personal journey to discover, why was I so afraid of God? Why was I so afraid of death? I went to the places where I learned, I discovered through lots of books that I read. I'm probably 50 books on the subject. I discovered that the New Testament was written by humans. And it was actually requested that it be put together by an emperor, Emperor Constantine, assembled a bunch of bishops in the year 325 after AD. And all of these people came together, and they picked and chose what Jesus's messages were, and put together what we know as the New Testament. And whatever they did not want was discarded. And what was discarded, most of it was ordered to be destroyed. Some of those documents that did not make it into the Bible actually have been found. If you study the discoveries that were done, the Nag Hammadi discoveries, when they found some of the Gospels of Thomas, I can't remember all of them, but then there were other discoveries, and throughout that region in Egypt, and where the Middle East, where Jesus was, a lot of those teachers, some of his disciples, some people who studied with him, but they were not necessarily mentioned in the Bible, that went on to become teachers themselves. They were always sharing what they received from Jesus, but most of that was shared verbally. So not a whole lot of written accounts, but in time, some of these things began to get written down, including the Gospel of Mary, a document called I believe it's called the Q document, or the Q Gospel, or the Gospel of Q. I can't remember exactly how it is. When these documents were found, they painted somewhat of a different story. They validated everything that Jesus said that is in my Bible is in red. And I think most Bibles put Jesus's words in red. And it supported that, but it did not support some of the other Gospels in the Bible that spoke of a God that we were supposed to fear, because God was Jesus was teaching us not to fear God. Not only that, teaching us that God was within. So once I understood that, then it made all perfect sense. Here we're taught that we need to be Christians like Jesus. Well, Jesus wasn't even a Christian. Christianity wasn't even made up. That was made up around the year 325. Before that, they were just followers of Jesus's word. They were known as the Essenes. They had different names, but they were basically following the teachings of Jesus. And then where did Jesus come from? Jesus was a Jew. He grew up with the Old Testament. And if you go back and research that too has a beginning. And there's millions of years before that where we didn't have a book, given to us by God. So when you begin to question things, you realize how little you know about stuff that the ego loves to be righteous about. So that process gave me permission to enter into this beautiful journey that started in 2002. So 22 years later, it allowed me to recognize that there really are only two voices, that of God's and that of the human ego. Human ego interprets things. That's what we do when we have a human incarnation. So as I became more I did more meditation. I quieted my mind. I became less fearful of death, less fearful of hell, less fearful of God. There was more space in my mind, because if you think all those fear-based thoughts, some psychologists and some scientists have calculated that we think between 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day, most of which are negative, fear-based, because that's what the ego thought system is. When I wasn't thinking all those fear-based thoughts, maybe I was only having 30 to 40,000 thoughts a day. So there was more space in my mind. There was more room to sit quietly and just contemplate, and to observe a flower, and just to be in gratitude for the flower, and allow myself to receive the whatever I needed to receive from that flower. And usually it was just nothing but gratitude, appreciation that that flower, being an expression of God, was being recognized by this expression of God. And in that moment, we just had sacred stillness, sacred quiet, and I could just be with that. And then I began to do that as I walked around. I would just look at something, anything, it didn't matter, sometimes a human, and I would just sit in gratitude. That's another expression of God. And I get to be God observing that. And that's what gratitude for me became, a practice of recognizing God in everything I see. Then I began to receive guidance. I began to sense the presence of what to me is Jesus. And of course, I had a beautiful encounter with God itself, which is with consciousness, which is encompassing Jesus, encompassing all teachers and teachings from a place of knowing the big picture, which was a lot for my little mind, egoic mind, to absorb at that moment. But it affected me. I felt the presence. I felt myself as one with all that is. So I'd already been practicing the meditations. And then all of a sudden I have this experience that once it happened, it absolutely marked it was like a line in the sand. I am, as Jesus said, I and the Father, Mother, God are one. And from that place, my journey has been to lessen my ego so I can hear more of the God within me, because I wasn't looking for God anymore. God is in me. I am an aspect of God, and my work is to love all that is and appreciate all that is as expressions of God, also with the understanding that those who know that they too are God, that experience God as their reality, like anything in nature, because it's not listening to an ego mind, it's just being what God is as that either we are consciously aware that that is what we are, or we're unconscious to it. We're unaware to it. Like I was unconscious. I was completely unaware that the whole story of a fearful God was made up. The whole story of hell, that was all made up. When I thought it was real, I suffered. But once I realized, oh, it's made up by people. I don't have to believe people who make up stories. I don't believe every single, horror story that I've read that were made up. I've read some of those books. I can't remember the name of that author. He writes, pretty scary things. And I used to watch some horror movies before. And then I don't do that, because why? Listening to the ego is horrific enough. So to listen to other people's egos make up other horror stories is like, why? What's the point? So when it became clear that I am operating with two thought systems, it's either I'm listening to God directly, or I am listening to the ego, and oftentimes the ego talking about God, which makes it fearful, because the ego can only project its fear. So it creates a fearful God out there, because that's what it is. It is the block to love. So it is the experience of fear. So then fast forward to today, here we are in 2024. I have taken the time to get curious about lots of other things, get curious about astrology, astronomy, to become more aware of the more that there is. And as we expand our awareness from myself to all that is, well, it's amazing how you see how everything is really interconnected. That's why Einstein was saying, everything is a miracle. If you look at everything, you cannot help but recognize that it is miraculous, all that is happening. And I read some of Einstein's personal writings that are not really talked about that much, but you can find them if you research them. And he believed in God, and he came to know God, and he knew himself as one who was just expressing information about the universe in a scientific way, but it was all coming from the source within, and it was all loving. Most inventors will tell you they didn't make up the information that comes through them. They become vessels as a songwriter, as a poet, and as all of us can do that. So I've been looking at politics for goodness, maybe the last 10 years. Before, I didn't pay attention to that. I just voted for who I thought would do the best thing that I thought I needed or my family needed. And I swapped around, between parties. Mostly I was Democrat, and because I did believe in helping people. But then what began to happen is I was paying attention with the awareness that I had about two thought systems, began to look at politics through that filter. What is God saying through this one who is playing the role of a politician? What is the ego saying through that one? And it was so easy to see. That's why I use this chart. Anybody who is talking from their egoic place, you could always find lies. There was always fear. There was always judgment. There was always control. It was like fascinating. And when you would hear God speaking through them, it was always about well-being, abundance, health, integrity, transparency. Everything was about peace. When I listen to the politicians talk about wars, I'm like, oh my God, it's the ego talking again. When they're talking about peace and having conversations about peace or ending the need for wars, okay, oh, that's God speaking through that one. So when I began to study the Course in Miracles, which for me began to happen in 2012, 10 years after I lost my mom and I began this journey, what I was being guided with Jesus's help, which is why I wrote the Power of Awareness workshops. It was all about understanding the distinction between the voice of God. I called it the voice of our soul and the voice of the ego. So I had about 5 years of teaching those two distinct voices through my workshops before I was finally guided to study A Course in Miracles. And I was literally being told, no, you're not going to study it. Don't open the course. It's not time for you, because I needed more time to really get clear about the how powerful it is to understand that salvation is simple, as we studied when we were looking at chapter 30 a couple of weeks ago. I think that might have been lessons or transmissions 169. Then I think it was 669, 70, 71. That's what we were focusing on until I got switched to this topic to be more focused on utilizing politics, because what we see outside is a reflection of what's inside. When I was waking up, my ego didn't want me to know the truth. It blocked the truth. It made me doubt the truth. It made me have all of these crazy ideas about the truth. But I had to override my ego, just as we have to override those that we don't want to be in positions of power. We call that voting. So I had to vote no when it came to my ego talking trash. So I had to basically say, no, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to the voice for God. That's the practice. You are making a choice. And little by little, as you feel the effect of the choice of listening to truth, the voice for lies can't sway you much. You become so discerning about the distinction between truth and lies, truth and illusions, that it becomes super easy. You don't have to judge the lies. You just know, why would I choose the lies when I can choose the truth? It's like today, why would I choose to think about hell and what happens after death when I already know the truth? Those thoughts don't play in my head because they've been outvoted by the truth that God is eternal and it lives within me, making me eternal. So this human experience, which is temporary, is just for me to enjoy being here as a representative of what I am, love. So it's just made everything so much simpler. Now, what I was guided to focus on for until however long it takes us to get through lesson 76. Lesson 76 title is I Am Under No Laws But God's. This is a very profound lesson in A Course in Miracles, which has 365 lessons. And by the way, I've read every single lesson, recorded every single lesson, given my interpretation of those lessons and my own personal experiences with those lessons. And you can find all of those on my YouTube channel. There is a playlist called the 365 Course in Miracles lessons. It's fun to look at some of the comments that people leave about how I just try to make it as simple as possible and as practical to understand as possible. Lesson 1 or lesson 76 is one of those lessons that if you use it as a marker of what is God's truth and what is the made up ego, it allows you to navigate things like politics, medicine, education system, money system. It allows you to see what God intended for us to experience as by choosing to be a human versus what the egos have made up that cause us to experience suffering. And you can see, which is why I create these charts, because I just pull what's in these lessons and make it a visual. So it's super easy to understand. And when you keep things simple, then you can see, oh, that's an ego thought. This is a God thought. And it's always, it's how I navigate life. When you have that awareness of the simplicity of the two thought systems, they are total opposites. That's what makes it easy and simple to understand. Not easy to apply because you have to override the mind that's been trained in being righteous. And if you think, well, no, the Bible is the word of God and it's the only word of God and that's it, then this stuff is not going to make sense, because in the Bible, it tells you God was mean and vindictive and you should fear God. That's the ego voice, but you can't understand that it's the ego voice because you have decided that that's the truth about God. So the truth about God makes no sense because you don't have a place to put that in because of that righteousness of the ego and reinforcement in the schooling years. And of course, our parents and the church let us know when we were doing things wrong, we're going to get in trouble. And who wants to get in trouble? Every time I got in trouble when I was little, just about every time it went with a spanking. So I associated being wrong with trouble and pain. So I did everything I could to avoid being wrong, meaning I always defended what I believed because I needed to be right so that I could justify to myself that even though it was incorrect information, it was right and I was not going to get in trouble. Well, another lesson from A Course in Miracles: in my defenselessness, my safety lies. You know, it's something that is said over and over. It's a characteristic of a teacher of God, is one who does not defend truth. Because when we are defending, we are in righteousness. Defending something, the way the ego does it, is to try to get somebody to agree with me so that then two of us can be wrong. Because if I can convince you that I'm right, then both of us are wrong. That's where defensiveness kicks in. When you don't have to defend it, you know it's truth because God says it's true. Like Jesus, okay, you can crucify me. You can do whatever you want to me because I'm an eternal being. I'm not attached to this body. I'm not attached to trying to convince you because I know you're under the delusion of the egoic mind. It's okay. Anybody who wants to believe lies, it's okay. That's why we incarnate. To protect, to believe what is not true, to have the experience of opposition. So when you take something like a lesson, I am under no laws but God's, and you look at what is ego laws, what is God laws, if you decide that you don't quite believe that ego laws are not of God's, it's okay. That just means that you're doing what we're being told in the introduction in A Course in Miracles, which states that you cannot alter what is in here, but you can take from the Course in Miracles whatever you can take at any given time. Meaning, you can feel good that you're studying the Course. You can feel good about your connections with God, your connections with Jesus. You can feel good about wanting to become a more loving person. That beautiful and wonderful, that moves you up in levels of frequency. It raises your frequency to be one that understands those things, cultivating a loving relationship with God and realizing we're all one and knowing that part of our work is to love our brothers and our sisters, because that's part of our salvation. However, it doesn't liberate you because you're still attached to righteousness with things that are incorrect, and they're dense, and they ground you in this perception of separation and being in the world. So let me read the first paragraph, and then I want to open this. This is going to be more interactive. I want you to ask questions, because my only goal is not to get you to think things the way I do. My goal is for you to question your own mind and sort things out, what is of God's and what is of the ego's, so that you can see for yourself that when you think with God, you do feel better. When you think with the ego, you feel anxious and tight and tense and worried and guilty and sometimes angry. And then it's up to you to decide, do the feelings that come with the ego, do you want to continue feeling that? Or do you want to start to feel more of what comes with thinking with God? Now, the journey from the ego to God is a process by which you have to override, you have to vote no to what the ego is saying. And if you are voting to agree with the ego, then you have to practice honesty, which is another characteristic of a teacher of God. Honesty says that you know what God is saying is true, but you still want to believe that what the ego says is true also. As a matter of fact, you won't be the only one thinking that way. This is a quote from Helen Schuckman, who was the scribe of A Course in Miracles. It came through her. She heard the voice and she wrote it down. In shorthand, she took down every single word. And she was asked if she was practicing the teachings of the Course. And her answer was, and she was also asked, not only is she practicing it, but did she really believe what she was saying? And here's her answer. And this is pretty much quote verbatim. I may have one word off or two. She said, I know that it is true, but I don't believe it. That was such a profound statement. When I read that she had made that statement or watched the video or something, I understood exactly what she meant. In the beginning of my journey, I knew what I felt when I met God. I knew what I felt when I was hearing guidance. I knew it was true, but I couldn't fully believe it and practice it because my egoic mind was trained in the opposite of that information. And for my mind, this is where cognitive dissonance comes in. When my mind believed that something was this way, and then God is telling me, no, you're eternal, you're don't even have a body, you're not even really a body, but I'm believing I'm a body. I see a body, I give birth to a body, my body was birthed through another body, but of course bodies are true. And I believed that I was a body, but I felt the truth that I am not. In that cognitive dissonance, I had to make a decision. Most people, when they experience cognitive dissonance, they know one thing and then they experience something else. A common example of that is somebody gets a phone call that their child has died and they know, wait a second, my child is alive, but I'm hearing a police person that I trust, I respect. They're not going to come in and joke about that. Your mind goes into shock. It's, wait a second, I can't hold these two truths at once. I know this is true. I'm a body. I know this is true, that I am non-physical. Then comes the work. The work is, how do I move through that bridge from this to that? And it just starts with a simple, it really starts with an allowing and a willingness to hold two opposites as possibly both of them being true, until you can little by little begin to get the facts, begin to find the evidence, begin to see things that show you that you are on the right track, moving in this direction of our non-physicality, and at the same time recognizing, but in this third dimension, I have a body. So I'm going to take care of the body. So what are you letting go of? Is the attachment that this is your truth, the only truth, and what you defend. What you're allowing is for something else to be equally as true. Here, let me mute that. And little by little, you work your way to trusting the truth that is always true until such time that this doesn't have so much of a pull. It's not your truth, but it's still a belief in the mind. And that's okay. So the Course tells you, you can't alter the truth, but you can take what you can take at the level that you can take it at the pace that you can take it at. And that is a loving thing that we have been given. Everybody who is waking up, for the most part, has a fair amount of time. Most of us have had lifetimes. To each lifetime, get more information. We incarnate at that level of consciousness, and we pick up from there, and we expand our awareness, and we pick up from there, and we pick up and we expand our awareness. Many people are going to go through massive cognitive dissonance in this lifetime because we're watching the systems being so opposite. I mean, we watched that with the whole pandemic situation when we had two groups. This group was doing it this way, this group was doing it this way. And we were like, well, wait a second. No, it has to be this way or it has to be this way. But we were seeing, no, there are two ways of looking at things. So let's look at this lesson. It starts with lesson paragraph 1, sentence 1. We have observed before how many senseless things have seemed to you to be salvation. Each has imprisoned you with the laws as senseless as itself. You are not bound by them. Yet to understand that this is so, you must first realize salvation lies not there. While you would seek for it in things that have no meaning, you bind yourself to laws that make no sense. Thus, do you seek to prove salvation is where it is not. This is a statement that requires an incredible level of maturity. You are being told right here, there is God's laws, and then we have made up, and this is lesson 76. After, if you've already read the text, you've gone through 31 chapters of information, you've gone through 75 lessons already. So to get to this point, there's got to be a level of maturity within your own mind that you recognize, okay, Jesus, what are you talking about here? So you're saying there are God's laws, and then I've made up a bunch of other senseless laws that I thought were going to save me, but really they make no sense because they just bind me to an idea that is not accurate. Well, as long as I believe that hell was there and was going to happen after I died, I was bound to this idea that was senseless. I was suffering because I was so worried about what's going to come 10, 20, 30, 60, 100 years from now, because I was believing the human-made laws and humans that made up stories that there is hell and that I would go there because a punishing God was going to send me there. I had to undo all of those beliefs. I had to recognize those beliefs. And I had to go, okay, Jesus is telling me these are senseless laws and there is another way. So let me stay, instead of right, that this is right and Course in Miracles is wrong, I was developing trust. I'm going to trust that everything Jesus has told me so far, I am eternal, I am one with the Father, I am pure life, there is no death. My mind is juggling two thought systems and I'm getting comfortable. It's like I got one foot in this one foot in that one. I got one foot in this one. People die. I've been to funerals. You know, I see it in the news, and so there's an experience of death. But then I also know that we're eternal. Jesus is talking to me from the other side. I'm receiving guidance. Helen Schuckman received guidance. There are lots of people channeling things that you know are true, that are not coming from those people. They're coming through them. So, oh, you got one foot here, one foot there. Beautiful. Now we have to play a dance of balancing. Am I going to lift my foot up and be more here? Or am I going to put my foot down and just, visit here from time to time? All right. So does anybody have any comments or questions about that first paragraph? Or can you accept it that it's just setting the stage for what's coming after? It's just letting us know you have many senseless things that you have turned into laws. And of course, when you make those things laws, they bind you to them even though they make no sense. When you know truth, they make no sense. So if you do have a comment or question, please unmute yourself. So let's go to paragraph number 2. Jesus tells us, today we will be glad you cannot prove it. You cannot prove that those laws are real because there is no way to prove them. For if you could, you would forever seek salvation where it is not and never find it. The idea for today tells you once again how simple is salvation. Look for it where it waits for you, and there it will be found. Look nowhere else, for it is nowhere else. So here we have to make a decision. Are you going to accept what is going to be coming in the remainder of this lesson as your truth? And you're going to look for salvation there. And what salvation really means, if we want to use a different word, salvation means liberation. You're freeing your mind from being bound to things that are not true. They're senseless. They cause suffering. Salvation is free yourself by making a different choice of what it is that you're going to believe as your reality, while still acknowledging that we're in the 3D realm and bodies come and go. And recognize that as bodies come and go, we are going to have emotional reactions, emotional experiences, and that's okay. When you feel the feels, but your mind is grounded in truth, you then become the presence of awareness, aware of movements of energy within you. You feel the sadness, the guilt, the shame. You recognize that you're dipping down into lower frequencies, lower vibrations, but you recognize that's just part of my human experience. How do I shift and lift my vibration? Is you tell yourself the truth. You remind yourself of the truth. All right, I'm sad. This happened. I lost my home in a flood, or I lost a relative, or I had a miscarriage. I got fired from a job. I'm feeling the feels. The feels are anxiety and discomfort and sadness and anger. I'm going to sit here instead of taking a drink or popping a pill to avoid the pain, or going shopping, or going to watch football. You sit with it. You embrace your humanness. You feel, I'm feeling sad. Why am I sad? Because I got fired, and I'm going to miss those people that I work with. Okay. Then you ask God, well, what else is there? God is infinite possibilities. And what's going to come up for you is going to be, if not immediately, then eventually, the idea that something else is coming. There's another job. Maybe you've been praying for another job. Maybe you've been eyeing other jobs. You just weren't prepared to quit. So your boss just did you a favor. When you look at every single thing, whether it's a divorce or a firing, everything is life giving you an opportunity to free you for something greater. But we don't see it like that because the ego's trained. Well, this is it. This is the thing that made me happy. This is the thing that made me, secure, because we give power to external things. Those are the ego laws. You now are responsible for my happiness. I can't be happy if you go away, if this money goes away, the job goes away. My happiness depends on you. So I'm going to hold on to you. That's what attachment is. When you recognize that in liberation, you're just saying, all right, in this 3D world, things come and go. That's just part of the process. I'm going to feel the sadness. Sure, I'm going to miss some of those people. Is there some anger? The boss, the way he fired me, could have been nicer. He did it by text, or he did it in front of everybody else. Okay, then you have teachings from the Course in Miracles, forgiveness. You know what? I forgive him. He didn't know what he was doing. He did the best that he could at the time. And then you forgive yourself. I forgive myself for believing that was my only source of happiness, or that he should have done it in a different way. I'm judging he did it the wrong way. Why? Because in my mind, the right way of letting somebody go would have been taking them out to lunch, buying them a wonderful lunch, and saying, you've been amazing, but today is a day that I've got to release you. I'm going to give you, 3 months pay so that you can find something else. We think that should be the right way. They should do it that way. Because they didn't do it the way your ego thinks is the right way, then it's going to be labeled wrong. Then we're going to project anger on them and judgment. You did it differently. But that's the ego. utilizing its laws to tell you you don't have power over your own emotions. Now they get to stir them up and it's their fault. You feel bad because it's their fault. No, you feel bad because you don't know the laws. The laws of the ego says to give power outside of you, and the laws of God is you have the power within. So when you look at something like this, you reckon how simple is salvation? Salvation, you liberate yourself from your human discomfort by looking at things from God's perspective. You go up and do that 50,000 view. 50,000 view says, oh, I've been released because something else is coming. That house got washed away in the flood because something else is coming. It was time for that to move on, and now it's time for something else. The washing away, the firing, the somebody leaves this planet is creating opportunities for stuff to come up for you to see where you have attachments. To move into the higher dimensions that we're going to, those who are choosing to go to, everybody doesn't go there unless they choose it, because we are free will beings. We are God willingly, freely choosing to experience different levels of consciousness. In this third dimensional level of consciousness, the ego's laws are all about suffering, attachment, suffering, deceit, lying, right there, right there. So as you learn what God's laws are, then you can begin to see, as the presence of awareness, what's happening inside of me when things happen in the world. That's why it's very simple. I am under no laws but God's. I know God's laws, and I'm playing with some of the human-made laws. Some of them are really helpful, like traffic lights, very helpful. Stop signs, very helpful. But then there are some that are nonsense. There are some laws that are made up that are pure control by egos who want to exert control. So you get to discern which laws are you going to follow, which ones you don't. But because you are always in control by your choices, because you have free will, you're always creating your reality. Are you creating more freedom, or are you creating more bondage? It is always in your control. People who don't understand this just, what do you mean? I didn't call this thing to myself. Well, they're in a dimension of thinking that is very close-minded, and things are very black and white. They're not prepared for this colorful perception, because in black and white, even a little bit of gray feels weird. Can you imagine letting some blue and some red and some green in? It's unfathomable, because it's all black and white. So Course in Miracles is expanding our awareness of ultimate truth, and we get to pick what we want to take spoonful by spoonful. It's not being rammed down our throats. None of it is. Spirituality is not rammed down our throats. Religion, yes. Spirituality, no. You have to choose at your own pace when you're prepared to receive the truth of spirit. Does anybody have any comments or questions through there? And we'll get through the next paragraph, which is a doozy. And that's when things get really wonky in these conversations. This is when we can see who's thinking more with ego and who's thinking more with God. All right, nobody's saying anything. So let's read paragraph number 3. Think of the freedom in the recognition that you are not bound by all the strange and twisted laws you have set up to save you. Translation: you're not bound by all of these human laws. They've been made up by humans who think with the ego, some think with God. You look at the Constitution, there you can see our founding fathers. You could see some of the egoic thinking. You can see some of God's truths coming in there, and they just absolutely amazing. More God than ego, by the way, as I have come to understand it. Sentence number 2. You really think that you would starve unless you have stacks of green strips and piles of metal discs. We have been conditioned to work really hard for our money. Stacks of green paper strips, dollar bills, piles of metal discs, our coins. We have been conditioned to believe you got to work, make money, then you eat. But see, God gave us this beautiful earth filled with all the food, all the nourishment that we could ever want. In the beginning, there were no boundaries, no barriers, no borders. There wasn't this continent is called this and that. It was just the land for all beings to enjoy. Truly the Garden of Eden. Everything was there. But when the ego begins to move into the position of power, I'm in charge, creating hierarchy. I'm on top, you're at the bottom. That's where all the greed comes from. That's where all the wars come from. I'm going to protect my stuff. I'm going to fight you if you try to come to my space. Thousands upon thousands of years ago, we began to create the law that says we have separate areas, separate boundaries, separate people, and this is my space, this is your space. And then if you want what I have, then we began to trade. Okay, I've got the cows and you've got the eggs, so we traded. And then little by little, money began to get created because it's kind of hard to take the cow over to the person that you're going to go get a couple of eggs from. You know, maybe it was far away. So we printed some pieces of, well, we just wrote some IOUs. Okay, I owe you the cow. You come and let me know when you want a piece of it. I'll keep it over here and I'll give you this piece. And I'm going to divide up the cow and I'm going to give it to a bunch of different people because I'm getting eggs and I'm getting veggies and potatoes and whatever. But when you're ready for your part, the next cow, I'll give you that until you've gotten all that you're supposed to get. And we traded. Nothing wrong with that. That's lovely. We create our spaces. Lovely. We're working with each other. We're collaborating. Wonderful. But where it got wonky is when those pieces of strip began to be a definition of my worth. And I have to work to receive that worth. I got to get paid more than this. I'm worth more than that. So we still today believe that we're going to go hungry, and we have forgotten. And to me, I believe that many of the beings that are operating as homeless people are reminding us, nobody goes hungry. Nobody goes hungry. You don't need money and coins to be fed. You can go to a soup kitchen. There are those who their heart is in serving, is in providing food because they understand the laws of God. We are one. We take care of one another. So that's just the first law that we're looking at here. Our mind is filled with beliefs, and that if you go and take it from the store, then you're considered a thief. And those are, some of the laws that we have created. And if you took it and you didn't earn it, to ingrain in us that we have to work to make money to buy things. And when you begin to question all of what we have created, such convoluted ways of making the system work, but it's the ego system, it's the ego's laws, still the laws of God are operating. The fruit trees are growing. Yes, some grow on this side of the fence that belongs to this person. Some grow on this side of the fence that is, public land. So you can go get it from this side of the fence, and it's God feeding you, like the lilies of the valley and the birds that are flying around. They get nourished, but we don't have the faith to have God take care of us because we don't want to be homeless. Because homeless is a bad thing, because we have created beliefs that say, well, that's bad, this is good. And working hard and sacrificing yourself for a job that maybe you don't like is the right thing to do, because then you get the money, and the right way to get food is to go to the grocery store and pay for it. All of those are egoic beliefs. Now, we agree to participate in that in a civilized society, but those are ego laws, human laws. The laws of God are that you are taken care of because you live on a planet that was created by God. The ego has made the world that we're experiencing of laws and regulations, that haves and have-nots, hierarchies and wars. But God created a world that shows us over and over and over again that no human ever created an apple tree. Not at all. No human ever created water. Do we manipulate the water? Do we dam the water? Do we, mix the apple tree with the pear tree and come up with an, apple pear? I see all kinds of fruit that have been human engineered, and they're different. It doesn't mean that we don't use our intelligence to engineer certain things and create more diversity. That's God working through us. But when we think that the human laws we're going to be in trouble. We're going to suffer, because if you don't have the money and you're afraid of getting caught for stealing and you got to feed those babies and you're going to go to jail, you're going to be suffering. You're going to be in a tough spot. And you may have to become a beggar. You may have to move through your fear-based beliefs. What are people going to think? I'm homeless now. People are going to think I'm a loser because I lost my job. And so do you see how there's such an incredible stigma that is created in not doing things according to the ego standard of what is right? So again, Jesus tells us, you really think that you would starve? Jesus is going like, are you serious? You got a whole planet full of food. You got brothers and sisters who would take care of you. The next one says, you really think a small round pellet or some fluid pushed into your veins through a sharpened needle will ward off disease and death? Translation, do you really think that popping pills from a doctor, that taking shots, vaccines, things with a needle are going to ward off disease and death? Well, God's laws are that you're the creator of your reality. If you think the things that let you experience the truth of who you are your own healer. And there is no death. You're here on a temporary journey. So consider your time as a human no different than when you go to Disney World on vacation for a week. Go have a good time. And when you come home from Disney World, is like no different than when you have the death experience and you leave. You're not going to go to hell. You're not going to go to heaven. You are going to return to a non-physical state where you get to then plan, what is my next vacation? Which planet am I going to go to? Which dimension am I going to experience? Which, am I going to be an alien somewhere, or do I want to come back to planet Earth? If you understand what planet Earth is all about, it is the highest teaching opportunity to help you see how easy it is to believe that you're separate from God and move yourself down into a very low frequency, low dimension, call it darkness, because you can barely see the light of truth, and you can experience incredible suffering. Why? Because you can. You're a creator. The mind that believes that you're a victim is the mind that has been covered up with beliefs that are not true, that are made up for the experience of what it's like to believe what is not true, so that you can have the journey of liberating yourself, salvation. You save yourself, you pull yourself out of that. It's an amazing thing. So here is what this is saying. We have given power to the medical establishment. We have given power to the politicians who decide what is the right medical intervention, what is not. We saw that with the whole pandemic. We saw where politicians bought by pharmaceutical companies involved with the medical establishment, which is paid for, most of it, by the pharmaceutical companies, their learnings. We saw how that whole system, a pandemic that had never happened before, within like days, around the world, everybody was saying the same thing. How did everybody know? Well, if you begin to look at things, you begin to see the laws that have been created, FDAs and big pharma and all these institutions who've been working together. You begin to see, oh, okay, they had a lot of years to plan this. And you can even watch videos that explain that they were doing simulations about exactly what the pandemic was going to be, and that everybody was going to be told that you've got to be 6 feet apart, that this is safe and effective. The talking points were already there. Well, that's why I didn't buy into that, because I was listening to the voice of God saying, no, my healing comes from my connection to God. This is where the wheat and the chaff get separated, where those who are still under the laws of the ego say, I know my healing comes from God, but I got to go to the doctor and get that pill. Then we have to be honest. We have to be honest. We think this is right. This could be true, but the mind is believing that this is what I need to do. The loving thing to do is to go to the doctor, get what you believe will help you, while all the while you recognize, but I know that the truth is that the healing comes from me because God is in me. So then you look at all the beliefs that have you believe that healing comes from outside of you. And little by little, over time, the healing journey, the journey to awaken, is a bridge. You take one step at a time, and there is no specific length to that bridge. The bridge is however long it takes for you to safely, comfortably move yourself from one end to the other. Move out of the third dimension of thinking where the ego is in control, and you move to the fifth dimension where God is who you go to for your truth. So you can know that it is true that healing comes from God and God is in you, but still believe that you can't heal yourself. You need to go to a doctor. It's exactly what Helen Schuckman was saying. I know the Course in Miracles is true. I know these teachings are true, but I don't believe them. So we are being told right here that this is, you make a line, well-being. Your well-being, health comes from God, but sickness and suffering come from the ego. While you are moving, you forgive yourself every single time you choose with the ego, but you're strengthening your awareness that there is another way. That is beautiful and powerful and wonderful, but it requires, honesty. And that is why one of the characteristics of a teacher of God is honesty, because we're moving between two things. And it's scary to leave this when this is what you think is right. It's scary because you don't want to be wrong. Because if you're wrong, you're going to get punished and you're going to get sicker and you're going to die. It's all that egoic game that we have to unravel. The next sentence says, sentence 4, you really think you are alone unless another body is with you. What that means is that we have been ingrained with the belief that you have to have a partner to be happy. And how many people in their, feel like they're going to be miserable because either their partner passes away or they can't find a partner. It's just incredible how many people are just busy, trying to get on Match.com, on all the sites, and going to the bars, got to find somebody, I'm afraid to be alone, because we have been taught that we need another body to feel like we have a connection. That's not true. Let me read this again. You really think you are alone unless another body is with you. You start cultivating a relationship with God, you begin to feel you're never alone because you're all one with all that is. How can you be alone? And when you allow yourself to feel the experience of that connection to God, you will feel like you got more people around you than you ever could have, because you've got an entire team, an entire universe, and all of it is with you. You can walk into nature and you're with all of God expressing itself as all those trees and birds and bees and everything. But the mind has been conditioned. How many movies have we watched about how miserable people are when their spouse dies? How miserable the what do they call it? There's a term for a woman who never got married. So there's all of these things that make it sound so bad. And because the ego wants to tells us we have to be right, we're going to keep trying to find that mate. And we're going to go through 3, 4, 5, 10, however many we have to go through until we find the one. When all along, you are the one. And you are the one with all that is within you. But have you cultivated that relationship? No, you haven't. And you haven't because not your fault. You were incarnated in a world that everybody looks outside of them. And the advertising is designed to make you feel bad if you don't have that mate. And everything, is around, so much of it is around the couples, laws that the ego has made. So we're going to stop there at end of paragraph number 3. But do you see how Jesus is basically saying, you don't need money, you don't need medical, you don't need a partner. So pretty much the 3 top things that we think we need to be safe, that we think we need to be healthy, that we think we need to be fed. And right off the bat, is starting to create cognitive dissonance. If you have already accepted some of these things as true, but you're not fully practicing them, then you're somewhere on that bridge. Good for you. If this is the first time you're hearing this, because this may be watched by somebody who sees it later and it hasn't done this work, and this might be the first time they're going to go, what? That's cognitive dissonance. 2 things that are opposing being integrated into possibility. You have to know where you are heading so that you know what the journey entails. All right. Any comments through here? Does anybody have anything come up for you when you're hearing this? Anybody who has practiced going to God for healing versus and not going to God, going within for healing, because that's the thing about the Course in Miracles. Don't go to God out there. God is not on the cloud. God is, of course, everywhere I see, and God is in the doctor. So if you feel that that is the way to go, then you do that. Let's see, Jen, you're saying when you know you are part of everything and everything is in you, you never feel alone. Absolutely, sister. Absolutely. That's when that is such a liberating feeling. But again, God is in that partner. And if you feel a connection with that partner, then that's part of that script that is written. That's that contract that we come to play out these relationships. And they're beautiful. They are beautiful. Oh, you got that in a meditation recently. Absolutely. And the medical establishment, there's nothing wrong with people who take an oath to help one another. That is a beautiful thing. But what is being brought into our attention are those who want to support the healing of another because they really believe that these medicines are helpful. By all means, go to that person. But if you go to one that is operating in a state of greed, which is the lowest frequency you can possibly be in when you're operating inside of the egoic mindset, is you have to use discernment. Are you taking things because you're totally giving your power away because you haven't cultivated a relationship with God to know that you are worthy of goodness, you deserve well-being? Then if you haven't cultivated that relationship of recognition, you're recognizing your worth, your value, then you are literally at the mercy of anybody. And if they're operating in greed and they don't even know what they're giving you, they're going to give you something that they've been told you're supposed to get, and then you get to deal with the consequences of it. You have to ask yourself, if God is the source of goodness and God created us to experience eternal life and wellness, why is there so much sickness? Why is this planet riddled with sick people, hungry people, lonely people? That's because our mind has been conditioned in the laws of the ego, and the laws of the ego are right and wrong. We have so many hungry people because we believe that if they don't have the money, if they don't have the green pieces of paper and the metal coins, then they shouldn't eat. Well, when we become so conscious of our oneness, those things are not going to be possible. But for now, we still have a mind that is filled with beliefs that block us from remembering the truth of who we are. And one of the first things that we need to remember is our oneness. We're made of energy. We're all connected. The suffering of one is going to be felt by another. Either you're conscious of it and you want to do something about it, and the only thing we can do is help people train their minds to stop believing in disempowering thoughts, or you feel the impulse to go work in a soup kitchen and help feed the hungry. There are amazing beings who are very connected to God who know that while people believe in separation, we're still here to help each other. That's why communication, collaboration, co-creation are important. They're important. If we're that advanced, we wouldn't be here. We would be with Jesus on the other side, assisting all these, delusional human beings running around like chickens with their heads cut off because they don't remember truth. But the ultimate truth is that we are playing these roles for the fun of it. We can. We're creators. We all know that when we transition, we just on the other side go, wow, wasn't that a fabulous ride? If you're at that place where that is your reality, then you're already saved. You're experiencing salvation. You're free and you're in the world, but you're not of it. If you don't know that, you're in the world and you're imprisoned and you're suffering and you're working hard and you're doing the best that you can to work your butt off, to put food on the table, to make time to get on Match.com, to have those dates so you're not alone, and to do whatever you can to, keep up with your vitamins and your pills and whatever. And that's okay too, because God doesn't judge how we're playing the game. God just gives us the rules to the game. That's what Course in Miracles is to me. And I played a lot of games without the rules, and it took me longer to play them, but that's okay. It was just fun to think up my own rules. My grandbaby does that all the time. My grandson, rules, what rules? Let's do it this way. Well, let's play like this. And it's still fun. It's still fun. All right. Any thoughts, comments? We're going to complete this, and this will be transmission 173, and it will be on my YouTube.
Laina, I just love this lesson. It's my favorite one, I think, because there's so much freedom in that. And when Course in Miracles came into my life so long ago, and experiences come up, and I followed that intuition that came up. I don't have to worry about where I'm going to live, what I do for a living, the flow and abundance, and all those things that are promised are just there. And so now I just get to keep practicing and listening to people like you, and keep practicing what's in this book. And you're just taken care of. We are just taken care of if we just get the hell out of the way.
That's freedom. And that's freedom, salvation.
It's beautiful. And gosh, I wish I could have told that to my 20-year-old self. but without all those experiences, I guess I wouldn't be here today. But thank you so much for this.
Of course, of course. And I love sharing this. So it's so much fun. So much fun. Anybody else? If not, we'll just complete and come back and see us next week. We'll pick up right here, lesson 76, and we'll pick up at paragraph number 3.
Oh, hi, Laina.
Hey,
Mike. A couple of things you said that just reminded me of kind of a funny story, I guess. You mentioned earlier how religion can be jammed down our throats and spirituality is just as we choose. And you talked a little bit about the COVID and the pandemic. And remember, it was 2021, I guess. And I worked, a couple of the owners of the company are very religious. And, the vaccines were on the horizon, and there was just a lot of fear, and really didn't feel that. And so we were sitting around talking, and they were talking about mandating the vaccine in order to work there. And I just told them, I put my faith in God. I'm not going to do that. And, if you need to get rid of me, get rid of me. But and they just kind of looked at me, being religious and knowing that I really am or I'm not. So I just had to smile when you were talking about that. It brought back that memory.
Yes. And what ended up happening? Did they let you stay?
Oh, sure. No, in ways, I guess I'm kind of like a big brother to them. So a few years older, and certainly this path that I guess I started about the same time you did certainly makes you look at things differently, and people pick up on that.
Yeah.
And, starts to rub off. So.
And what's so beautiful about that, Mike, is that they are religious, and lots of religious people, their faith is in the establishment, not in God. And you being an example of not being religious, but being grounded in your own spiritual truth, were actually an example. And they probably looked at, oh, he's got the faith of a mustard seed. And here we, who maybe practice religion on a more faithful every Sunday, they were being given an example of your faith was stronger. You don't have to, because God is not in a building. God is not in a book. That was one of the things I also got sent to the principal's office, is when somebody told me that the word of God was in a book. And I said, well, then God must not be omnipotent and infinite. If it's all finite and in a book, then which is true? That God is infinite or that God is finite? And that got me a paddling. I had a lot of paddlings. It was a big wooden paddle. Bend over. Whack.
Yeah, it's amazing the things that we look back at our childhood and see now, and just some of the thoughts that we had that I think really, in retrospect, we knew something when we came to this planet in this
Yeah.
lifetime.
Yeah.
And
Yes. And then here with our friends that we connect with, we help remember, it activates. And most of the time, it just gives us permission, and just having that permission to look at things differently avoids that severe cognitive dissonance that can sometimes make people crazy. People get bad news about something, they can literally have a mental breakdown. And so it's amazing. I so appreciate you guys being here and hanging out with me. Thank you for those of you who've been traveling with us, you on your way somewhere and you chose to listen. And again, if any of this helps you, please share it. Please, help me get the word out there. Everything is on my YouTube channel, Laina Orlando, or my website, lainaorlando.com. And I'm going to be creating a more formal community. I'm finding a site and setting it up to have a community where we can talk in there. I'm kind of over social media, the social media that has so much control involved because it's egoic. I want people who want to vibrate at a certain frequency, and we want to focus on how do we cultivate more of that relationship with God. That to me is the most exciting conversation. Helping people learn about their ego. I'm not so much into that anymore. That I'm more into how to discern between those two voices for people that I don't have to convince they have an ego. They've already discovered that. But they're looking to choose to strengthen their connection more to the voice of God. So anyways, you're welcome, sweetie. Of course, you're welcome. All right, guys. Thank you so much. See you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.